Hello, everybody. Happy Friday. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Kyler Cheatham, your host for the Confluential Live. I hope you've had a great week, and we're excited to discuss a topic that we've seen come up quite a bit, especially in AI conversations or in heavy manufacturing, and that's around predictive maintenance, predictive analytics, and how do you ensure that you're actually using predictive analytics to garner results, not just flagging a bunch of alerts all the time so that your team stops listening to them. So today that's kind of what we're going to go into. Before we get to that, if you're new to the Confluential Live, thank you so much for joining us today. The point here, if you've never seen one of our episodes, is to have a real-time conversation with our audience. We bring insights to the table, we bring a topic to the table, but really the real meat of the conversation comes from questions for the audience. So I invite you at this time to pop in wherever you're joining us from today, just to check those comments, and then we can go from there. But I invite you to put in your insights, your questions, anything that you want to talk about today. This conversation really is for you. We do go live every Friday. We try to keep it on that schedule with our client work. But the goal of these conversations is just kind of have an informal chat with an independent lens about what we're seeing in the marketplace. So with that, Adam, I will let you introduce yourself, but I'm wondering if we can kind of start the conversation around the idea that predictive analytics really promises insights, but a lot of times in practice, they're just very expensive kind of noise generators in the organization. And so I want to drill down into kind of where the real ROI is. A lot like AI, it's a very broad term, and you need to be specific on your strategy around how you want to utilize predictive analytics. So, with that, I'm excited to welcome Adam Cheatham, our CEO here at the Confluential.
Yeah, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you're joining us from. My name's Adam Cheatham. I'm the CEO of the Confluential, and I'm super excited about this conversation today because it kind of strikes at a bit of the discussion in the marketplace on the difference between actual results and hype, right? Everybody wants predictive analytics. It's going to give them the answer to what's going to happen in the future. That's what people want to figure out, right? How do I take the information that I have today and use it to draw meaningful conclusions about what it is I should do with my business to maximize outputs tomorrow? What often happens is you just get a bunch of data and a bunch of metrics that don't show you a ton of meaningful anything other than, well, this one says I should do this and this one says I should do that. Which way do I go?
Mm-hmm.
They're all based on very often a mess of data with not a lot of ability to provide real interpretations. So you just end up with more information with less usefulness because now you're starting to focus on all of these messages that you're getting without really knowing which one's clear, which one's accurate, and which ones are not. And it's not surprising to me that many of our clients come to us and say, we got all this predictive analytics stuff going on, and they all say different things. Well,
Mm-hmm.
they're all pointed in different directions. So, super excited about this topic today to kind of help a little bit with that and provide a little bit of clarity to the discussion.
Yeah, absolutely. Because we are kind of in the predictive analytics gold rush, if you will. It really is kind of the make or break moment for many enterprises to utilize their data in effective ways to make good business decisions, but only if that foundational piece is there. So first, as I always say, it's very helpful, especially from an independent standpoint, to define the different terms here. So we have predictive analytics, which is model-driven insights used to anticipate some sort of future outcome, whether you're using it for sales forecasting, predictive maintenance. There's a lot of different pieces in there. And today we're going to focus on another term, which is less known in the marketplace, but we like to talk about it because it's called predictive waste. And that's when our models are generating alerts, reports, scores that nobody cares about nor acts on. Or worse, a lot of times the trust breaks down due to these false positives, and then we're creating kind of workarounds within those operational piece. Anything you would add to kind of the definition check before we get into the actual strategic approach in the conversation?
Well, like that conversation, predictive analytics is meant to help you make decisions based on what it is you think is going to happen, right? Um, so many things are reactive in the marketplace on, well, we all of a sudden have these tariffs. What do I need to do based on my metrics to be able to respond to them effectively? How do I use predictive analytics to say if these indicators are going to go up in price, what is going to be the eventual outcome? Where should I make adjustments, right? Is my supply chain just simply going to get more expensive and I'm just going to have to deal with that? Am I going to have to increase costs? Am I going to have opportunities to source vendors from a different place or use one of my secondary vendors to supply raw materials that are all
Mhm.
being impacted by the supply chain challenges, the tariffs, those types of things? Predictive maintenance is also a good one as it pertains to being able to tell on what regular schedule a piece of machinery needs to be maintained.
Mhm.
Open up a PM and be able to shut that down. What does that have? What type of an impact does that have on production?
Mhm.
When can I predict my production slowdowns so that I can do my
Mhm.
preventative maintenance, even if it's not technically time to do that yet? If I know that I'm going to be slowing down next week because we just had a lull in orders or something like that, or I have a big project that is going to shut down the whole plant anyway. Might as well do my PMs in the middle of that, even if they're not quite there yet. So we just reset the clock. So
Mhm. Absolutely. And I think all of those are really important. I think what I'm going to do today, and I didn't even tell you about this beforehand, but I'm going to give like some case studies to kind of help us hone down on like what that actually looks like. So we're talking like um, more actual outcomes as opposed to just theory, and then that will help us kind of guide these questions. Does that
mhm.
sound good?
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, so I'm going to give you one. Well, you can actually pick. I have three. Why don't you just pick the one you want to hear? I got UPS, I've got BMW, and I've got S&P Global.
Let's do BMW.
BMW, love that. I knew you were going to pick that one. We must be married or something. But
I
okay,
don't
so
know.
I don't know you. So BMW, let's use this one. This is a positive case study. So I've got some positive and negatives for us to really talk about. So what BMW did is they integrated AI-powered predictive analytics in its manufacturing process. So this is
Mhm.
creating proficiency through predictive maintenance. So we're focusing on predictive maintenance here. And so what they do is they can predict potential failure outcomes before they can occur. And so what
Mhm.
this led to was significant reduction in unplanned downtime, optimize maintenance schedules, and reducing unnecessary maintenance activities that were wasting time, wasting money, and then improved production efficiency and product quality. So they also utilize those predictive maintenance to know their quality assurance. And so this is a proactive predictive maintenance, and it shows how these predictive analytics can transform real manufacturing operations. So, in contrast to that, when we have ineffective predictive maintenance, there's models that need to accurately, right, predict these equipment failures. So this all sounds well and good, but most of the work here is making sure that these models are accurate, they have efficient historic data, and they're maintained. So when that doesn't happen, this leads to unexpected downtimes, increase in maintenance costs, and then negating all of the benefits of the predictive system, which mostly we know the manufacturing floor staff is not going to put up with. For 1 minute, they've spent their career, doing workarounds of, stupid technology that they didn't want in the first place. So a
Right.
lot of this kind of gives us a baseline. So do you want to react to that first, or I can go ahead and take, I think the few of these questions
Well,
are
I'd
kind
love
of
to
like,
react to it first. The it doesn't surprise me that an automotive manufacturer is going to find ways to get more predictive and efficient, right? Um, the auto industry is known for this in very many ways. They're the original they're the original optimization of the shop floor with the way that that works. So what I like about what BMW did is they took a skill set that they have and they magnified it using predictive maintenance, AI, predictive analytics, and those types of things because they took a skill set that's in place
Mhm.
and used AI and predictive analytics to create more tools for their users, right? Overall, that takes something and makes it better. If they didn't have the amount of data that it takes to run that type of a chain on the floor, then this becomes problematic, right? All I'm doing is creating an isolated scenario where I know where that when that machine's going to go down, but I don't know how critical that machine is to my actual manufacturing process if I'm not seeing it as a holistic system.
Mhm.
So when I'm talking about an assembly line and I say this machine's going to break down, I'm only focused on one. I'm not looking at, okay, so if I take that one offline for preventative maintenance because I know when it's going to come off, I have no idea how the rest of the production line needs to adjust to accommodate that. Seeing it as
Mhm.
a full system and saying, okay, if I pull this one out, it's going to create a bottleneck here and here. So I need to either speed up to get as much as I can beyond that point. So when I pull that machine out for a PM, the rest of the supply chain continues going after that, and the rest of the assembly line can continue to do their job. Or I need to make sure that I'm not ramping up front and
Mhm.
creating a stack in front of that machine. So looking at substitute machines, what other areas can we start thinking about from a perspective of multiple lines and saying if I pull this one out here, I can increase capacity on those other ones to make up for it. Now I'm using it holistically, right? Now I'm
Mhm.
looking at it from a perspective of how do I plan for these types of preventative maintenance
Mhm.
activities as opposed to react to them when something goes down. So
Mhm.
having the auto industry experience in that I think is a really good lens in being able to show what it means when you have a muscle mechanism that your company can flex and then being able to use a technology to emphasize improvement in that.
Mhm.
What is important about that skill set is something that I've seen many times on the flip side of people who are on old green screen technology and want to be
Mhm.
able to see what's happening in their business better because it takes an executive 2 weeks to get a report that it requested. 2 weeks is too long, right? Just because I
Oh,
got to call
absolutely.
IT to tell them how long, tell them what I need, then they're going to take 2 weeks to build that, and then by that time, I don't have any ability to react, right? I just am later gut checking myself on was I right in what I think I was onto or no, and by that time, the opportunity to make an adjustment is passed. So many folks look too far beyond their capabilities and look to AI to fix that. And that's not what's going to happen. Predictive
Mhm.
analytics isn't going to solve your data problems. It's
Mhm.
going to make them harder to see and harder to deal with. And a
Mhm.
lot of times you start thinking about, okay, I need predictive analytics. Dude, you're on a green screen that takes 2 weeks to make a new report. Like predictive analytics is like 9 steps down the road.
Yeah, right.
You need to get your data right first.
Mhm.
And once you figure out what's out of the box on something more basic, you might find that that solves a lot of your problems
Exactly.
that predictive analytics is for. So that's why I like that BMW case study because it takes that skill set, which is we know our assembly lines. Automotive industry generally knows what it looks and feels like to be overly efficient and the gains that come from micro efficiencies so that you can plug in predictive analytics and be able to move on it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I love the word micro efficiencies. I'm definitely stealing that for sure. So let's go to some of these questions. I see all of your questions in the comments. So I invite you to continue to ask questions or to put your insights here and your thoughts around predictive analytics or even your own case studies. So let's just start at the top here and let's talk about we've got a question here on LinkedIn for our audio listeners. The question is, what is the biggest barrier between predictions and decision making in your team?
That's a fantastic question, and the way I see it is trust in the data,
Mhm.
trust in the outputs, right? So, another great example of companies that aren't ready for this type of thing that are trying to be. I don't know how many executives I've heard tell me I get two reports from two
Mhm.
different people that are meant to tell me the exact same thing, and they both tell me something totally different, and they both fight over whether or not theirs is right. And what's fascinating to me is they all draw data from the very same source,
Mhm.
this very same database, because that makes sense. But they don't trust that data because it's messy and it's not clean. So they modify it in spreadsheets. And then as they modify it, they create a different message. And then you have two output reports based on how did I query the database and then how did I create an actual Excel model to
Yeah.
analyze what I got out of it that produces different results. From there, you have an executive who has two totally different answers. So the biggest barrier on this, I would say, is the cleanliness and reliability of your data as a single source of truth, as well as the trust in the outputs.
Mhm. Yeah, I think I would agree with that. And kind of using an example to answer this question, like if we're looking at healthcare as an industry, switching over
Mhm.
from manufacturing, a lot of times when we use predictions and decision making, in certain healthcare settings, predictive analytics is hopefully intended to forecast things like patient admissions. And a lot of times that leads to a misallocation of resources.
Mhm.
So if there's an inaccurate position that resulted from understaffing or overstaffing, it affects both the operations, the patient quality, and the people. So if I'm, a nurse and I showed up and it's totally overstaffed and I have nothing to do, I no longer have any trust in that technology. It only takes one time for that to break down, which then even the decisions made after that, even if they're good decisions, you're going to have to climb that mountain as leadership to the organization because you've completely blasted your culture, right? It only takes one time to do that. So we need to make sure that we understand kind of what's under the hood before we're outwardly making the decision as the leadership team, or we're honest with our team about that. We have a new process. Please be patient with us as we get through a couple weeks with testing them. Be honest about that before we turn over. So that's a great question too. So,
I think what's also interesting about that is when you start thinking about healthcare and AI, that's a really good intersection of some of the challenges that are going to come up with this, where you have people who overly trust the answer, they don't want to think about it, and so something spits out an answer, and you go and do it. Um, that's not what this is meant to be, right? You still have
mhm,
to think about these things. You don't want AI to tell you what medication and what amount you should be using for somebody because it's based on a limited data set. It's never going to be able to tell you the perfect answer. It may give you a right answer most of the time, but in healthcare, the wrong answer could cost lives, right? So, and this is what I find is interesting about years and years ago, what happened with Watson, and how Watson was supposed to be an enabler to provide answers. All kinds of great data in that thing, all kinds of great conclusions and the like. But because every person is different, it's not right to just skip to the here's the answer based on what Watson says. And that's actually what caused a lot of the problems because Watson was unable to draw meaningful conclusions that could be trusted because it had a relatively limited data set. And let's be fair and honest, how many people out there that are listening right now can say their doctor has enough data on them to plug in an AI and produce a diagnosis that's best for that person
mhm.
based on a series of circumstances that are happening right now? Nobody. It's
Absolutely. Yeah.
It's just not possible. You could have a whole slew of data from across the world from 6 billion people and input into this, but your specific scenario is going to be different and it has to be accounted for.
Yeah. And if you don't know what Adam's talking about, I'll do a video on IBM Watson Health on my TikTok channel. But basically what happened here is it was used for cancer diagnosis and treatment through artificial intelligence. I think the biggest problem was not the capabilities of Watson, but how it was described. And IBM's overpromising of this groundbreaking solution in oncology. Was there mistakes? For sure. But I think the biggest thing is this was a silver bullet type of solution that was going to cure cancer. And that is not what we do. We
Yeah.
don't chase the technology to make the strategy. We use the human intelligence to make the strategy. The technology is a tool for the operators. That's it. Period. Full stop.
Yeah. Well, I think that's the piece of this. I've been reading a lot about the hype curve, Gartner's hype curve, where you kind of have this lofty expectations and you kind of drop to our reality sets in. What can't this do? And then it'll rebound from that and stabilize. And I think that what's going to be a real key to figuring out where that sits in the future is going to be based on how do we make sure that we're enabling people to make good decisions, right? The people part of this can't be eliminated. It just simply can't. You can replace a lot of mundane and remediary jobs, right, that are overly manual, heavily repetitive, and that's good for the world, right? Those types of manual, repetitive, heavy jobs are bad for the body. But removing the critical thinking component of it is just not something that you want to do at the end of the day. And another example I like to use is the Tesla, the Tesla self-driving feature, right? We're going to have your Tesla drive you to work by itself. And then it crashes into the rear end of a fire truck because you weren't paying attention and didn't check it, right? This will have flaws. We'll have models. Hallucinations aren't ever going to go away in AI. So where's our bar and our level of acceptance of error with AI? And it won't be if it makes a mistake, it makes a mistake. We're far more forgiving of humans that make mistakes than machines that do. So when Tesla's self-driving features go off the road, literally, and somebody gets hurt, you see every single one of those instances on the internet as an unacceptable application of technology. It costs one life. Think of how many lives are lost by humans who accidentally do something that causes a fatal injury. We're more willing to accept it. Well, that's too bad. That shouldn't have happened. But that's kind of the difference in acceptance rate of failure rate is going to be interesting to see develop in AI versus people. And I think that we're not going to accept a very high rate at all. So there will always be a need for a person to check a model.
Absolutely. And I mean that self-driving feature, which they call FSD, it had over 5,000 participants. Geez, it's Friday. And it really actually was quite successful, but there were these things called edge cases, right? And that's an edge case and hitting a child in a school zone. Well, if that's your child, that's not an edge case to you, right? So there's a level of risk you have to be able to assume those. It's also super confusing because who would sit in a self-driving car and not pay attention? But what do I know? That would be just crazy to me. But I think that kind of goes into this question here on LinkedIn. Adam, in your experience, what separates dashboard noise from operational intelligence? And this actually reminds me of when Adam and I first met working together. We've always worked together. And I used to try and convince his team in sales operations to make me all these Tableau dashboards because I had, an unwavering addiction to Tableau and could convince like the junior people on his team to make me these dashboards without him knowing. And then he would kind of figure it out, obviously, and be like, we cannot just make all these disparative dashboards. So I feel like that makes you like oddly qualified to answer that question. It's all thanks to me and my, overall use case of Tableau dashboards.
Let's be honest, I was qualified for that before you, but yeah. No, so I think that this question is an interesting one because dashboard noise comes from seeing too many things, right? Um, let's use your vehicle dashboard. We're into cars today for some reason, so let's just run with it. Right now, it tells you a certain number of things, right? Some of those things are useful. Some of those things are not. Does it matter to you how many RPMs your engine is running at? Maybe not, but it might if you're having a problem. So that's actually an interesting indicator. But speed, fuel gauge, battery power, engine pressure, and those types of things, all useful things. But you could put all kinds of things on that dashboard, and all of a sudden you've got so many things to pay attention to, you forget which is which. You could have an indicator that shows how much windshield washer fluid is in there. You can have an indicator that shows how much oil is in there. You could have an indicator that shows tire pressure, all of these things that could tell you all of these, every little bitty tiny thing about your car. You could put what radio station you're listening to on the dashboard, and the last 9 that you listened to on your dashboard. You could put the last 10 songs, all of these things. You could put all of those things on your dashboard. Your car has the ability to do that. How much of that information is relevant to actually driving down the road safely? Most of it's not. And frankly, some of it is probably counterproductive. If you're sitting there being like, oh, what song did I listen to last time? Now I'm looking down this, I'm trying to figure out which one it is because it's on my dashboard. And then you wreck your car because you're figuring out what song you listened to 10 minutes ago instead of driving, right? Dashboard noise comes from not knowing what are the important metrics in your business that you're tracking and showing too many that cloud your vision. Some of these things don't matter, just plain and simple. If you run out of windshield washer fluid, isn't it okay that you find out about that when you just kind of pull on it and it sputters a little bit and then is nothing? All right, I'm out of windshield washer fluid. I should stop and refill that. It's not going to impact my daily driving experience. I'm out of one particular sub-assembly, that's on half of my my top of the line motorsports cars. Okay, fine. When do I need it? Isn't it somebody else's job to figure that part out? When it comes to a dashboard, it has to be meaningful to the person looking at it. If it's not meaningful to the person looking at it and gives them the ability to influence the improvement of those metrics, then it's wasted. That's my opinion. Operational intelligence should allow you to make better decisions more quickly that enable you to have a positive influence on your business.
Absolutely. I think that 10 out of 10, no notes on that. That was an excellent answer. Yeah, absolutely. So let's go to this one from Avery here on LinkedIn. What are the biggest sources of predictive waste, useless models, overfitting, or misapplied insights? And how can companies avoid them or even find them? I think is a big piece as well.
Well, I think that the biggest sources of predictive waste are going to be based on drawing models from incomplete or bad data, right? If your data is not good, it will be wasteful. Now, there's a sense of this that I agree with Jeff Bezos' approach, which is, your data should get you 95% of the way there, but that last 5% should be your gut, right? You got to make decisions because your data is never going to tell you exactly how this is going to work. And I love that example because Jeff Bezos had a litany of people on his teams trying to bring that he tasked with. If I do this thing, if I charge a monthly, an annual subscription for a service that provides free shipping and all of these things, free 2-day shipping or whatever it is the timeline was at the time, how is that going to impact my business? And every single report that he got told him it was going to run it into the ground. It was going to provide very little revenue for a major cost in providing that free shipping, and it was going to wreck their company. And how many people right now are paying $99 a year for Amazon Prime?
Me,
We
we
are,
probably have like two
right?
Prime accounts or something like that. Like, I mean, you couldn't live
Right.
without it. Like, I don't know anyone without Amazon Prime.
And how's
Seriously.
Amazon doing right now?
I mean, I would say decent.
Pretty good. And when would you say that Amazon Prime is possibly one of the major accelerators in that growth and having them literally take over the entire
Oh,
online retail
absolutely.
market space?
Yeah.
All of his data told him this was a terrible decision.
Mhm.
Terrible. It was going to ruin his business. But you know what? He did it anyway, and it turned out pretty good. He's is he the richest man in the world right now? Is it he and Elon kind of go back and forth?
You know,
Elon says
I don't keep tabs on such things, but you know, he's obviously just doing well. And I think that, you know, one of the theses of that statement is understanding, you know, the need for that human intelligence within that operational
yeah,
intelligence, but also understanding your business in that level. So having that ability to know what's going on, where you want to
yeah,
go, how you want to innovate is a huge piece of understanding the predictive waste. And
yeah,
regular audits are a huge piece of this too. Having that discipline to say, okay, yeah, it was a ton of work to implement all of these things to get our data there. Took, you know, 2 years of heads down work to get us there. But it is not a set it and forget it type of thing. It is a
yeah,
living, breathing, there's adjustments to these models all the time. So your people have to understand that they are operators of these models, not the other way around. So that's the mindset you need
yeah.
to be able to ship, especially in manufacturing, because there can get to be this level of dependence that is going to create waste in here. We're not being due diligent about what we're measuring because we just kind of come in, take a look at our dashboards, and move on.
Yeah, well, I think to answer this question more directly, because I'm just now realizing I went off on a tangent and didn't at all. Um, the biggest source of predictive waste is going to come from a misalignment of requirements, KPIs, and the actual data outputs, right? What are my business requirements and how do they fit into my organization? How do I use those to produce a model that helps me track how I'm doing in that space? And then how do I pick a metric that fits that, right? So if I'm talking about operational efficiency on the shop floor, I need to be able to understand all of my requirements as I'm moving from machine to machine. What does my BOM look like? What does my routing look like? Where are my layers? Where are my sub-assemblies, my Kanbans, and all that stuff coming in? And then once I know all of that, how do I tell what are the indicators that are going to tell me that that is working in a healthy fashion? That's going to tie back to the requirements and how it is that fits and must work. Because if something's antithetical to our requirement, then it's driving a problem, right? It's not fitting that requirement. It needs to fit into our KPIs. So our KPIs then need to tell us what is happening and what are the outputs of this process. So then I can tell when a drop in that KPI is means something, or when an increase in that KPI means something.
Mhm. Yeah,
An
I think
increase.
that's
Go
yeah.
ahead.
No,
Sorry,
you go ahead.
I'm rambling.
You finish
So
your thought.
I'm good.
Oh, well, I was just going to say, I think that that is a great overview. And the key to that, going back to our BMW example, is ownership of your systems. BMW, for an MES, to give you an idea, they have a mix of established vendors. They have Siemens for product lifecycle management. They have
Mhm.
SAP in their MES. They probably because they're down the street, you know, Germans could probably work with Germans on that level. But they also have a proprietary system that runs a lot of these integrations. So looking at that piece is understanding that you're going to need to have those architects, those system engineers, those those people that this is their primary responsibility, not outsourcing these models to a vendor and saying, yeah, just show me what, you know, another, you know, company did and make that for me, and then I'll do it the same way. That's going to be a source of waste because those requirements were not owned by you, they were given to you, and that's a really dangerous and expensive situation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. Great questions here. So let me get into a few more. If you see any, Adam, just let me know here.
Well, I want to answer this: is AI going to take jobs?
Okay, cool.
I like that question because it's the
Let me
question that
just find it
everybody
here.
asks that all the time. That's from Mick.
Yeah, did see it, but then I lost it. You go on.
So is
Is
AI going to take jobs? Right. The AI is going to create more jobs than it takes. Let's put it that way. Right. Is is AI going to replace the function of moving through GL entries and journal entries and stuff like that, move and reconciling that your books and things like that? Yeah, AI can do that. That's remedial. Who wants to do that? Maybe some people like doing it because it's the repetition is comfortable, but AI can do that, and so AI will replace some jobs. Yes, just like the assembly line and the industrial revolution and the creation of the steam engine replaced jobs.
mhm,
That's a fact. Yes, it will do that. I realize that that's a freaky, scary thing to think about, but at the end of the day, it will produce more jobs than it's going to replace. And by that, I feel quite confident in that the amount of possibilities that are being expanded for companies to be able to do
mhm,
as it pertains to what's available in the marketplace is supposed to be a $500 billion business by 2030. AI is from the current 40 some $billion it is today. That's in 5 years. This is going to multiply by six. That's what they think. How many more jobs come from that additional $450 billion, right?
mhm,
That's where I would be thinking about things. Where are the opportunities? And people as fear-based creatures don't like the idea of loss. We've talked
mhm,
about this before,
mhm,
but at the end of the day, loss can sometimes be one of the most powerful instigators of growth. And that's something that I've tinkered with a lot, particularly recently, and understanding where it is we are today with the Confluential and how
mhm,
we left something behind that was supposedly doing us quite well. And we decided to stop doing that. We lost that touch completely. And that left us with where are we headed? What are we doing? No
mhm,
idea. Let's go fishing. um, but that loss has brought us to the Confluential, and that's such a
mhm,
this is a way more powerful, way more fulfilling place to be than we've
mhm,
ever been in our lives, and
mhm,
that is because of that loss. That loss is what spurred us to change, and without it, we'd be doing the same stuff for the same people, and I just don't see that as something that would have been positive long term. But now we're doing amazing things,
mhm.
and I think that's pretty darn cool. So yes, it's going to take jobs, but what it's also going to do is have a net impact, net positive impact on the number of jobs that are available, and I think that's where people should be focused on.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that a lot of times we give AI too much hype. What we need to do is know that all jobs change, right? So having that ability to be flexible in the marketplace, are you used to seeing robots and automation on the shop room floor? Not no, but isn't it a time to be alive, to be able to operate those? That's again why I call AI operators, because it is just a system
Yeah,
that needs oversight in that. So, is AI going to take jobs? Yes, the super boring ones, absolutely. If you like carrying pallets across the manufacturing floor, then by all means, it's probably going to take that job. But there is something else that needs that human intelligence. It's all a connected system, a connected spine of the organization. AI can be the neck that turns the head, but the brain is ultimately going to be the human component of how do you utilize this for your decision making. So I think what we have here, we've got about 10 minutes. So this is an overwhelming topic when it comes to predictive analytics and how do you use it, especially if you're, a small to mid-sized manufacturer that might not have an established system or not sure if they need an ERP or an MES or all of those different things. So I'm going to pop to Avery's question here. How can smaller companies, even larger companies, this is a good question for, with limited data science resources, still leverage predictive analytics while also reducing predictive waste? And adding to this question, what can you do today to make sure that you're actually in a situation in which your data is ready for technology of this sophistication?
Yeah, and there are a couple other questions that kind of fit into this about how do you know if predictive
Mhm,
analytics is right for your business? Is predictive analytics good for small companies? Those types of questions. And I think that the answer is relatively clean, which is yes. And in Avery's questions, how can smaller companies with limited data science resources still leverage predictive analytics? You have data.
mhm,
You don't. We're not talking about from a smaller perspective automating every single bit of your business
mhm,
and plugging in predictive analytics everywhere. What we're talking about doing is knowing where it matters, right?
mhm,
As an organization that's maybe smaller, that has fewer production lines and is more dependent on one particular product or suite of products, predictive analytics can still be leveraged to focus in on that one, right?
mhm,
How is the market changing around this product, right?
mhm,
That's what I think is the important piece of this question, which is to say, how do you focus in on what matters to your business? And then how do you build models around that? Just because
mhm,
you don't have a complex and complicated, massive bill of materials and 9 different product lines that service 50 different products themselves, that you don't need to be complicated to take advantage of
mhm,
AI and predictive analytics. You just need to know what matters, right? What metrics are important to your business, and how do
mhm,
you influence them? And then you plug the rest of it in. I would say smaller companies have more opportunities for this
mhm,
because they can get on the ball a bit faster and being able to produce key insights from a more narrow point of view. I think
mhm,
that's more powerful because at the end of the day, it makes a bigger difference in a smaller space. You don't have to boil the ocean to get insights. And that's where it is. I think this becomes really, really neat for small and medium sized businesses because
mhm,
you can become more hyper focused on just the things that matter to you, not all of the things. BMW has to think about how it shaves seconds
mhm,
off its production time and where it is that comes from because those seconds literally equal millions of dollars. 5 seconds to BMW is a massive undertaking for finding where that 5 seconds gets better and doesn't
mhm,
become a 5 second savings here and a 10-second cost somewhere else. For a
mhm,
smaller business, yeah, we're not looking for 5 seconds. We need bigger than that.
mhm,
But our opportunities are right in front of us and we can see
mhm.
them all pretty clean and clearly and we can look at the whole thing. And that's, I think, a
Yeah.
whole lot easier to do.
Absolutely. I think that's well said. It's worth, just recognizing, just like AI vendors have popped up, a lot of I'll fix your data vendors have popped up as well. That's not at all a bad thing, right? It just
Mhm.
reminds you that you need to do your due diligence. I always advocate for bringing in someone to take a look at least the organization of your data that has that
Yeah.
background that can give you, like, maybe you might consider this or you might consider this, especially if they know the system that you're working with, so that way you need to understand where your data is, collect it, clean it, and make sure that you're able to maintain it from there, because there's nothing worse, we see this all the time, than buying a new
Yes.
expensive system just for your data to deteriorate. However, when we look at these new vendors, you must establish those references. Make sure that you're doing your due diligence and you're not just hiring the fastest and cheapest one. I've seen a lot in the industry saying, hey, I can do this in 5 minutes. To me, that's a big red flag, because nobody knows if they can do it in 5 minutes, right? Without seeing what your data looks like, especially
Yeah.
for small to medium-sized businesses that are getting pushed this plug and play system
Yeah.
marketing. Make sure that you understand your system is not plug and play in any way, shape, or form, no matter how small you are. You have to understand where your data lives, where it's housed, and how you can leverage it to make good business decisions in this situation. So even though you're limited on resources, don't go out and find the cheapest, fastest version to clean your data. It's not secure and it's totally inefficient. So good question there. All right. So wrapping up here, let's take one last question. If you see one, just let me know.
What does a successful business analytics project look like in a real business setting?
This is from Bite Size, our Bite Size channel. Shameless plug. If you don't know what Bite Size is, it's my podcast where I interview industry affiliates. It's also a newsletter on LinkedIn. Definitely check it out. I'll link it below. But our channel, often we use our questions that we get on Bite Size and bring them to the Confluencial Live so Adam and team can answer them.
Yeah. So a predictive analytics project started, and as boring as it's going to sound, as it sounds like any other project, which
Yeah.
has clearly defined scope and goals, a good solid plan for achieving them, and then an execution that fits with it that double checks back to those goals. Right. I love this question not just because it's tied to the predictive analytics thought process, but it's also tied to so many tech programs. Right. We see this in ERP at a massive, large scale all the time. What does a successful ERP implementation look like? And at the beginning of the conversation, it's like we have improved efficiencies. I can see my data better. I know what my inventory turns are, and I can figure out how to maximize my supply chain optimization to be able to lower my inventory turns, and then I that reduce my cost of goods sold. But you have all these great ideas of what scope and expectations are. And then somewhere around 17 months in, somebody asks, what does a successful ERP implementation look like? And the answer is a very short and curt, we just go live. What? That's it? You just want to go live? Like, we can do that right now. We can go
Yeah,
live.
exactly. You could do
Turn
that
it
today
on.
if that's so important to you.
But you get like you may not be able to ship product at that point,
Mhm.
right? So it's a successful project has clear goals and objectives that's set to a strategic path that fits the goals of the business and then maintains that
Mhm.
focus all the way through up until the end and then measures it afterwards. That's what a good predictive analytics project looks like. Am I getting the data? Am I getting the analytics that it is I expected to get? And then are they allowing me to achieve my goals and objectives that I set out to
Mhm.
achieve in the first place?
Mhm.
If they're not, that's fine. That doesn't mean that your predictive analytics project was bad. It just means that now we have a way of looking back and saying, all right, we did
Mhm.
these things. We hope to achieve these goals. We didn't get them here. We didn't get them there. How do I now go back and say, why? Did I just set unrealistic goals? Or did I miss something in my requirements that now needs to be a part of my continuous improvement program on this predictive analytics path? Those types of things. That for me is ties the whole concept together in the strategy that you impart on to begin with, and it comes back to the stuff that you were talking about before when we used to work together. I want all of these metrics, right?
Yeah,
What is that going to tell you? I don't know. I just need it. Like that's
they're
not
pretty
good enough.
color.
You just need it. That's if you don't know what you're going to use it for, then you don't know that you need it. You
Yeah.
just want
And I did know what I was going to use it for. I
it.
just, when you work in a Fortune 500 company, you're not their first priority. So you got to make yourself their first priority.
Mm,
And that's why I'm a corporate dropout because that never worked well for me. I was never good at following the rules. But with that, this is a great question to not only look at as a whole as an industry, what does that look like for your business? And
yeah,
sitting down, what are the outputs we need? What are we measuring? What are the KPIs to the enterprise? And that is the point of this conversation is actually leverage predictive analytics for something that's going to give you an outcome. It doesn't matter what you do. you can use it in any way in your organization, as long as you really hone down in what you want to use it for. Lose all the fancy hype around a word and look at it and understand how it's going to make you money through efficiencies, through product quality, through all of these different things. That's the only thing that you need to focus on, is how is this going to make your business better? If you don't know that, the technology most certainly isn't going to tell you it.
Yeah.
Well, very good. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. We are out of time. As always, I will personally go back in after this episode, tag Adam in some of the comments, and answer all the comments we have. We're so grateful to the audience for all these great questions today. It really is the point of this conversation, is there's many different ways to do things in enterprise architecture or enterprise systems in general. So finding your way is really the point of having these transparent and open exchange of ideas. So thank you to the audience for being here today. Thank you, Adam, for your time. And we will see you next week, my friends. Have a great weekend.
And happy Father's Day to every dad out there.
Absolutely. I was about to end the stream, but absolutely. Happy Father's Day to all of the great dads out there. We're proud of you and we appreciate you. So way better